welcome to this Cosplay Masterclass from Metaverse from Repop. My name is Anna Mia. I go by Mia. Welcome. I am going to be giving you some information on some of the tools that I use for cosplay and some of the equipment that I suggest. Now, this is a great class for if you are a beginner, because this will really get an idea of what you might want to get started in your toolbox. And then if you are a more experienced cosplayer, hopefully this will give you some ideas or some tips and tricks on how to set up your cosplay creation space. So just a little bit about myself. I have been cosplaying since 2007. I went to my first anime convention, didn't even know they existed back then. And my coworkers told me about it, and I was like, wow, there's all these people and they get to dress up as my favorite characters, and they're all having such an amazing time, and I knew I really wanted to get into it. So I started making cosplays with no experience in sewing or crafting or anything, and thank goodness we live in a time where YouTube exists, because I really learned everything from YouTube, and then I started getting books on sewing and kind of developing my skills. I will say my first book on sewing was I think it was the Dummy's Guide to Sewing. So if you want a book that will very plainly explain to you all the basics of sewing and fabric, that's always an easy way to go and worked for me. And I will tell you, it doesn't take a lot of money to get started. If you want to hand sew and get creative with your supplies, I've seen some amazing stuff done by hand and with supplies as cheap as cardboard. So there's always a place to start. But getting some equipment as you go on definitely does help out a lot. Kind of amazing the difference when you sew something in 10 seconds that would have taken you about 10 minutes to sew. So what I want to go ahead and introduce you guys to is my first sewing machine that I ever used. This thing has been with me since the beginning, really. I think I had a much cheaper one, which I would never recommend. Don't go for those very cheap ones that you can get at stores. They won't last. I think this one was about $120 on Amazon. If you're looking for the model number, it is a Singer 2932. Pretty cheap to find on Amazon, and it does everything that you're going to want it to do, all the basic stitches. Very simple to work with. I will be honest, I use this for the majority of my projects just because I'm so familiar with it. I know the ins and outs of it. I can actually rethread it in less than a minute. So once you get a good machine that's going to last you for a while, as long as you take good care of it, it will last you for a really, really long time. The basic stitches that you're going to want are your straight, your zigzag. Honestly, a lot of the other ones are either decorative or things that you really don't necessarily need to use, but are always handy for different applications. So yeah, basic sewing machine I recommend for everyone to go ahead and get. You can find this on Amazon, as well as I believe Joann's also carries the Singer line. But something really basic. You don't need to get a sewing machine to get started, but I will say it really does help. The next step of another machine is a serger. Now, the serger is something that is not necessary. You can get away with just using a basic sewing machine for pretty much everything. But if you want secured seams, if you want something a little bit more professional looking, one of the advantages of this is if you're working with very stretchy fabrics, you don't have to worry about your seams ripping or too much tension on things. This really does make for a very professional looking garment when you're done. One of the other advantages to it is for lightweight materials like silks or georgettes, which we'll go into a little bit later. You can actually use this to hem the bottom, and it gives it nice drape and movement. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. This is a Brother 1034D. I believe this one is about $150 to $200. It's honestly lasted me about 4 or 5 years now. I use it pretty regularly. I will say getting a serger does take a little bit of practice, especially with threading it. But once you get it down, this will really help you with a lot of projects and give you that secure feeling that you would like to have with your cosplays when you're wearing it around. Now, the next one is the big boy, the heavy duty. So this one is one that's a little bit newer to me. I've had this for about 2 years. It is the Singer 4423. It's a heavy duty machine, which means it is prepared to take on the fabrics that would probably break my bigger machine. So leathers, velvets, anything that's heavyweight. With some of these, you can actually, with the heavy duties, you can go through foam, some smaller bits of foam. So it really does help to allow you to work with more materials. Again, not necessary, but definitely helpful. I started working a lot with vinyl and leathers, so this definitely made it where I didn't have to worry about breaking so many needles. So yeah, I would recommend this one, the Singer 4423. Great heavy duty machine, very simple and easy to use. Actually, pretty much the same as using my beginner one. So I was already kind of familiar with it. And then the newest, which is amazing and fun, if I can get it out of here, is the digital sewing machine. So this one is a Singer 9960. It's digital electronic, so basically everything is set for you. What's great with this is you don't have to worry about tensions. So with the more beginner sewing machine, you will need to practice with tensions when you switch different types of materials. Meaning if you're stitching a stitch on a lightweight fabric, the same tension is not going to work for a more medium to heavyweight fabric. So you're going to have to adjust that manually. What's nice about this machine is it kind of recognizes what the material is and adjusts the settings for you. Makes it a lot easier, a lot simpler, kind of takes a lot of the guesswork and also prep work out of your sewing. So I definitely, this one is great. It's a little bit more on the pricey side for people who are just beginning. But honestly, if you have the ability to get this one off the bat, it really will help you just kind of get started a little bit quicker. Now, beyond machines, I really recommend not only YouTube videos, but also books. Some of the books that I started with is the Complete Serger Handbook, which teaches you everything about how to use a serger, what the different tensions are, the controls, how to maintain your machine. This is kind of like has been my Bible for everything serger. And then the Sewing Machine Classroom, which is basically a textbook on how to start sewing from beginning to end, different types of techniques, how to use presser feet, organizing your projects, just a great educational tool for anyone wanting to start getting into sewing. I definitely recommend this. So these two books, highly recommended for those getting started in sewing. And then the other thing that I really recommend people start doing is getting to know your fabrics. When you start sewing, this is probably the most important thing, and it's also going to save you a lot of money, is getting to understand different kind of fabrics that are available. So I know a lot of you are familiar with Yaya Han's line at Joann Fabrics. And so I have this book that shows you different kind of fabric types, from brocades, which are kind of these embroidered designs on top of the fabric, metallic spandex, twill. Now, every fabric is going to have its own purpose, and it's going to have its own, what I call drape, or what's called drape. So basically what it is as you have a piece and you want it to lay a certain way. Say, for instance, you want a dress to be flowy as opposed to stiff. You wouldn't want to use something like twill, which is very heavyweight and isn't going to have a lot of movement. It's going to be more stiff. You would want to use something more like a silk, or even gauze can have a nice drape to it because it's lightweight. So getting to know your different types of fabrics that are available the weights to them, understanding how they lay will greatly help you when you're looking to buy fabric online. So I definitely recommend starting to look at fabrics. Keep swatches. I actually do keep a book, several of them actually, where I will keep a hold and track of all of my scraps and fabrics that I use for different projects and keep them there so that way later on I can go back and reference those, or have that available for the next project. For instance, if I want to use a similar fabric but maybe something a little bit heavier, I can look for a similar fabric, look at the weight that's listed, and then that way when I go online and I'm looking at fabric and it's got the weight listed, I can kind of compare it to what I already have in person. So let's see. Let me stop for a moment and see what questions we have. Which sewing machine is the hardest to thread? Sergers are always going to be the hardest because you are working with 4 pieces of thread at the same time. So that one you actually have to thread in a certain order, which is kind of nonsensical. For instance, with this one, I would actually thread this first, then this one, then this one, and then this one. Kind of awkward. They all go to the 2 needles that are down here. And which is why I actually have it labeled at the top, written on the top, which numbers go when, just to keep it in my own head and make it simpler for myself. As far as threading any of the rest of them, most sewing machines are always going to get threaded the same way. So it's pretty simple. Honestly, the digital one, again, takes a little bit more or less of the work that you need normally. But yeah, I find them all to be equally, especially the singers. They all kind of go the same way. What is the worst fabric you have worked with? Honestly, fabric is hard because everyone's going to have their own different snags and personalities to them. Lightweight fabrics can be a pain because as you're sewing it, you can actually sometimes suck the fabric into the sewing machine because it's so lightweight. So what I recommend with really lightweight fabrics is to put some sort of stabilizer under it, whether it is some sort of parchment paper or something that you can easily tear off and remove. It helps to actually give it more weight. Another is when you're using 2 different types of fabric and sewing them together. Say you have something that's non-stretch and you have something that's stretch at the same time. As you're running it through the machine, one's going to want to pull faster than the other. So with that situation, it's really important to pin and go slowly. I tend to be a little impatient sometimes, and that can be to my detriment because sometimes I'll go a little bit faster than I should, and you really need to have that maintained control, especially when you're trying to get 2 fabrics even. What did I make them Mickey ears in the back? No, the Mickey ears are all collectible Mickey ears from my collection. I have not gotten to where I make my own Mickey ears, but that would be a cool idea. What machine would be the best for thinner fabrics like gauze? Honestly, for thinner fabrics, you can get away with anything. It's really a matter of going slow and having something to stabilize. Gauze can, again, be very easy to pull into the machine, especially the wider the wefts and weaves are. So the threads that go this way and this way along the fabric. The wider those are apart, the more room it's going to have to move and be flowy, but it's also going to make it very easy to snag. So with gauze, I would actually recommend taking 2 pieces of parchment paper and sandwiching it as you're going through the machine, and then later just tearing that paper off. That makes it a little bit easier to work with it and less chance of accidents happening. Okay, so one of the things I also recommend for people, and then I'll come back to some more questions, is to get to know your different feet on your machine. So basic, simple machine foot kit, universal kits will have different types of sewing machine feet. For instance, rolled hem feet, satin stitch foots, buttonholes. And it allows you to be able to do more things with your machine. For instance, the nice thing about rolled hems is if you're doing something with gauze, you can actually take the bottom hem and roll it. And what it does is it does a crisscross stitch as it rolls the hem as you're working it through. So kind of like a surfboard, when you're surfing, the wave goes around. That's what it does with the fabric, is it rolls it around as it stitches. And what this does is it creates not only a nice hem at the bottom of really, really drapey fabric, but it actually weighs it down a little bit. So that way you get that flow when it's not kind of going crazy everywhere. This is a basic, kit that I got on Amazon, very easy to work with. And then if you really want to go haywire, there is the full kind of set with everything. It's a bit much. I don't think I will ever use everything in this kit. It's massive, but understanding how to use presser feet and different types of feet for your sewing machine will help you with achieving a look that you might not be able to get simply by either hand sewing or just using the foot that comes with your machine. Though a lot of it you can do, it just, takes a bit more time and effort to work with. So this is what I will say on the basis of sewing, and I will move on to foam. Let me see if there's any more sewing questions. Have you ever found any new sources of cosplay inspiration over lockdown? Have you found any new? Honestly, I've been watching a lot of TV and a lot of movies. And so I've been finding and reading. And so I've been finding inspiration everywhere. And that's kind of the hardest thing about cosplay is realizing that there's so much that you want to do and then trying to narrow it down and figure out when you have the time for all of it. I think my running list right now is probably about 15 cosplays, if not more, that I want to do. But it's hard to not be inspired by everything. So, all right. So moving on to foam. Foam is great for making armor. I would recommend going to TNT Cosplay. I believe that's what it is, TNT Cosplay Supplies, and they have a nice little intro pack to foam. One of the things that they do is they send you this little sample packet, which shows you the different thicknesses. And this gives you a great idea of what you can do with foam. The thinner foam is great for less structural pieces, but more detailing, as it has a tendency of being able to rip pretty easily. Same thing with crafting foam, which is what you'll find primarily at Michael's in the craft supply. And then as you go up, your foam is going to get less malleable, at least without being heated, but it's going to be able to take a lot more stress, and it's going to be a lot more protective. So I recommend getting one of these sample packs so you can actually see what the thickness is, because it can be kind of hard to envision. What I say is I usually say something around the middle thickness is what I use for most armor. And then, so for the big armored pieces, those like Warhammer, huge cosplays, they usually go with the super thick foam because they have that grandiose, bigger look to them. So as far as books for this, I definitely recommend Bill Duran's Foam Smith book. I hear he's also come out with a new one recently. This is how I learned everything about foam, is through his books. He teaches you everything from designing, templating, finishing, painting, gluing. What's great is it's got lots of pictures, and he shows you the mess ups, right? So he shows you what happens when you do it wrong, which is kind of nice because sometimes you do it wrong and you don't know what happened in the process. But what he does is in the book kind of show you, well, if this is what happened, then this is what you did wrong, which I found very, very helpful as a beginning foamsmith. So definitely recommend his books for foam. And then as far as other supplies for wig working, definitely go ahead and get yourself a mannequin head. Sorry, she has seen some abuse over the years. But definitely get yourself a mannequin head to work with. I recommend one with the holes because you can get these nice little handy things where you stick this here and then it's got the clamp so you can actually set it on a table. free to work with it. Don't have to worry about holding it between your knees and hoping that it doesn't flip off somewhere. So I definitely recommend one of these. And then also the Got to Be Glued styling products are amazing. I'm pretty sure you could probably piece together cosplay supplies with the glue power of some of these. So definitely make sure to check these out. Another suggestion that I have is, as you guys can see, I've got my wigs hanging on an expandable coat rack. The nice thing about this is that you can then let them hang, which makes sure that they don't get tangled. They're not going to lose their styling within a bag. So my most used wigs are hanging from that, which makes them much easier to get into. Let me see. I think I've touched on most things. Also, I do recommend getting a soldering iron. Just a basic soldering iron for working with foam. And then what I've done is I've kind of given some examples of ways that I've used it in designs and different nozzles and what kind of effects you can put into foam with either a fine point or a rounded point. This can help with decorative finishes on your foam work, so I definitely recommend one of these. My Dremel has probably been one of the best gifts my husband has ever given me. This thing is used for everything. I can cut through plastic and wood. I can do some sanding and kind of getting pieces off of foam. So I definitely recommend a Dremel. You can get one pretty easily at Home Depot for cheap, and then the supply pack for extras. Just an overall, I pretty much use this for everything, so I can't recommend that enough. Get yourself a mannequin. I recommend either going on Facebook Marketplace to look for cheap ones, or I'm not too sure if Sears is still going out of business, but as far as I know, they were. A lot of stores, as they're going out of business, sell their extra mannequins. So it's a good time to grab one or two that you might be able to use for whether actually making your cosplays on them or just simply having a place to store and display them once they're made. And finally, just get sample packs for companies that you want to order from. For instance, Spoonflower is a company that creates custom fabrics. You make the design, they print it out on different fabrics. You can get, I think this was $2 for a sample pack of all the different fabrics that they offer, which makes it nice and easy for you to compare. Same thing, I use a lot of crystal rhinestones, definitely worth investing in a chart where you can see all the colors. Anything where you have the ability to look back before you purchase online, some sort of reference chart or sheet for what a store offers is definitely going to help you, and highly recommend it. All right, so a little bit over 6 minutes left. I'll answer some questions. See, I've only ever done cosplay with my own clothes and made the additional pieces with cardboard. What's the easiest material or fabric to start with for a complete beginner? So for me, I personally like working with spandex. I know a lot of people don't like stretchy fabrics. I find them a little bit easier to work with, only because your measurements can be a little bit more lenient, meaning it's got that stretch in it, so you can be a little bit off on your measurements, which helps as you're starting out. Cotton is always going to be the easiest material to actually sew, because it's not going to move on you. It's going to stay put. It's easy to crease with an iron and get it prepped for being able to sew nice, clean lines. So cotton is definitely going to be the easiest to actually run through a machine and sew with. But for me, making garments, I tend to find spandex to be a little more forgiving. For someone that's completely new to cosplay, can you create costumes without using a sewing machine? You can. I made my first couple cosplays completely by hand. It is time consuming. I will say that I probably spent way more time sewing half of a garment than I would doing an entire one, but it is possible. So if you've got the time available for it and you're willing to have the patience, you can definitely do a lot by hand. And in all honesty, sometimes having that extra, hands-on experience will help you later on when you're having to finish off and do techniques by hand. For instance, sequin work or beading work or, finishing edges. So honestly, I think everyone should take the time to learn by hand at first because it gives you that experience for later. It's just a pain. Has there ever been a build that caused one of your sewing machines to stop working? Yes, I have definitely gotten fabric sucked into the machine where it won't work. And what I find is most of the time when that happens, it's because your tension's wrong. So it's having to back things out, start over, grab a test piece of fabric, run it through until you get that tension right. Because the last thing you want to do is buy a piece of fabric at $39.99 a yard and then mess it up. So always test out small portions just to make sure you don't get those snags. What's the quickest cosplay you've ever made? Oh gosh. Honestly, I've thrown stuff together just out of my closet and just had fun with it. And I honestly recommend everyone just do that every now and then. Just find a character that you really like and just have fun with it. Don't feel like you need to build something so big all the time. Just have fun. And I think that's really what cosplay is about. So, but yeah, no, sewing, the fastest one I've ever sewed. That one's hard. I'll have to come back to you. But basically kimonos. Kimonos can be very simple because very straight lines. I've had some hit or miss experiences with patterns, but what's the best way to learn tried and true techniques of creating full outfit costumes? Honestly, practicing and getting a lot of muslin, a lot of cheap fabrics. Find a fabric store that has a fabric basement bargain bin and grab some of that fabric and start practicing making different types of sleeves. There's lots of different resources for free patterns. If you go to cosplaycentral.com, you can actually find lots of articles and resources on where to find patterns, where to find fabrics, where to find tutorials. So check that out. There are a lot of free patterns online, and you just have to practice, in all honesty. What are your thoughts on cardboard cosplays? I love them. I love anything that's creative. Like, I feel like if you can tell me that you made a jetpack out of a vacuum cleaner that didn't work, which I've seen done, I'm completely amazed and in awe of you, and I admire that because it's that thinking outside the box that can actually save people money and be completely creative. Let's see, how do you deal with constant thread breakage? The constant thread breakage is either a problem with your needle or, again, tension. So just double checking, making sure you clean out your machine, making sure that you've oiled, everything's running smoothly. And then at that point, if you really have to break down and get it serviced, play with the tensions on your machine and see what you can get on that. So hopefully you guys have learned some really cool tips and tricks and some neat little things, and hopefully inspired you guys to start getting out and making your own cosplays. It's not entirely hard to learn as long as you are willing to take the time. No one's ever good at something the first time they do it. Trust me, I've never been good at something the first time I've done it. I have failed multiple times. But the point is to keep trying and keep practicing and really put in that work. And luckily nowadays we live in a time where the cosplay community is so vast and there are so many people that are willing to help. And like I said, cosplaycentral.com is a huge website resource that's been put together with cosplayers in mind to help educate and inspire. So check that out for any instructionals that you might need in the future. And just get in touch with the community. Find local cosplay groups that you can join that you can bounce ideas, or online Facebook groups that you can chit chat and talk about different things or suss out problems that you might have. But we're all out there and we all want to help each other. So with a little bit of time that we have left, I want to go ahead and say, if you guys have any further questions, I've got some meet and greet spots available at 3:30 and at 4:30 today. Go check the Metaverse website to go find those. And those will be available. I'm here to help you guys out. Of course, you can find me on my social media at Anamia Official on pretty much everything except I am anamia.cosplay on YouTube, and Facebook. So thank you guys for joining me, and I hope you guys have a blast making your first cosplays and stay safe and sound. And thanks for joining. Bye, everyone.